Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're taking our first look at the new $1,000 Radeon RX 6900 XT, AMD's most expensive Radeon product to ever feature just a single GPU. But before we do check out the 6900 XT, my sidekick Tim has today's video sponsor.
Experience ultimate performance and get pixel-perfect detail with the new MSI Optics MAG274 QRF-QD monitor. Raise hell in game and soak in a blazing fast 165Hz refresh rate, stunningly quick rapid IPS panel, with unrivaled color reproduction that topped our own gaming monitor charts here at Hardware Unboxed, all backed with NVIDIA G-Sync compatibility right out of the box. Offering 1440p resolution at 27 inches in size, MSI really has set a new standard for enthusiast gaming monitors. If a gaming monitor could be described as coming close to perfect, this would be it. So learn more about MSI's new Optics MAG274 QRF-QD monitor via the links below.
Okay, thanks Tim. Once everyone's finished checking those links down below, we'll get back to the 6900 XT. Okay, well that should be about enough time, so we'll get back to this thing. And what was I talking about again? Yeah, that's right, dual GPUs. So, in years gone, we've seen $1,000 plus Radeon GPUs, but they've always been dual GPU designs, such as the $1,000 Radeon HD 7990, or the insane $1,500 US Radeon R9 295X2, for example, both of which they kind of sucked as they relied heavily on driver and game support for Crossfire. The 6900 XT doesn't suffer from those issues, packing a single GPU with 5,120 cores. However, that doesn't mean it's any better in terms of value. When compared to the 6800 XT, we're getting just 11% more cores and TMUs with the same 128 ROPs, and the cores are clocked at the same 2250 MHz. Because the memory subsystem goes unchanged, we're looking at 16GB of GDDR6 16GB per second memory on a 256-bit wide bus for a peak bandwidth of 512GB per second. All in all, the 6900 XT is set to be no more than 11% faster than the 6800 XT, while costing over 50% more, at least according to AMD's MSRP. That's kind of really all you need to know about the 6900 XT, but of course we'll go over some benchmark data, because that's kind of what we do. But like the GeForce RTX 3090 review, I'm going to cut this one a bit short, so we'll look at a few games and then jump into the 18 game average, followed by the cost per frame and all that other good stuff. Actually, speaking of the RTX 3090, the 6900 XT wouldn't exist without it. I'm sure you've noticed over the years how mainstream video gaming's become. If you're under the age of 30 and you don't play video games, you're probably now considered to be a bit of an outlier. That being the case, as gaming's grown in popularity, the demand for PC hardware has increased, and while some people would assume that the increased demand means mass production and therefore lower prices, that's not always the case. With limited competition and an increased difficulty to achieve performance gains, pricing of graphics cards has only continued to increase. Products like the RTX 3080 and 6800 XT are likely quite reasonably priced, but why limit yourself to reasonably priced graphics cards when there's a market for exotic over-the-top products like the $1,500 US RTX 3090? NVIDIA's been testing the waters with flagship GPUs priced well over $1,000 US for years now, and has discovered that there are those willing to spend big dollars just to have the best, even if it is the best by only a very small margin. In the case of the RTX 3090, they decided to offer a gaming graphics card that's less than 20% faster than their next best offering, while charging well over twice as much. AMD's of course followed suit and created the 6900 XT, allowing them to cash in on gamers with, well, how should I put it, more money than sense. AMD's premium may be less when compared to NVIDIA's, but you're also getting less performance with no real added perks. For example, at least the 3090 is offering well over twice the VRAM capacity at 24GB versus 10GB for the 3080. The 6900 XT, as I mentioned a moment ago, shares the same 16GB configuration as the 6800 XT, so in my opinion, it's even less special. It also means that the 6900 XT packs 33% less VRAM than the RTX 3090, so the fact that it's 33% cheaper might not convince gamers with deep pockets to give AMD a go. But I guess with availability the way it is, most will just go with whatever they can get their hands on. Anyway, we'll talk about that a bit later on in the video. For now, let's go over the test system and then get into some results. The test system uses the Ryzen 9 3950X with 32GB of DDR4 3200CL14 memory in a dual-rank, dual-channel configuration on the MSI X570 Unify motherboard. Okay, let's get into the results. Starting with Death Stranding at 1440p, we find that the 6900 XT is just 4% faster than the 6800 XT and 3090. We're likely running into a CPU limitation here with the average frame rates up over 160 FPS. Moving to 4K does indicate that we were seeing a CPU limitation at 1440p with these higher end GPUs, as the 6900 XT is now 14% faster than the 6800 XT, which is a bit beyond what I was expecting to see. It also meant that the 6900 XT was able to edge ahead of the RTX 3090, beating it by a mere 3%. Moving on to the Rainbow Six Siege results, we see that at 1440p, the 6900 XT is 7% faster than the 6800 XT, and honestly, that's what I'm typically expecting to see. The margin does open up to 10% at 4K, and that puts the 6900 XT ahead of the RTX 3080, but still 8% behind the 3090. Next up we have Watch Dogs Legion, and at 1440p the 6900 XT was 11% faster than the 6800 XT, jumping up from 85 FPS to 94 FPS, and that nudged it ahead of the RTX 3090. Then at 4K we're looking at a 12% performance increase for the 6900 XT over the 6800 XT, but that meant it was still 10% slower than the 3090. The 6900 XT looks pretty mighty in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it has to be said, at 1440p, offering a 12% performance increase from the 6800 XT, making it 28% faster than the RTX 3090. Keep in mind, this is an AMD sponsored title, but still that is very impressive performance. Now, at 4K, the 3090 does come back quite heavily, though the 6900 XT was still able to beat it by an 8% margin with 64 FPS on average. That meant it was 12% faster than the 6800 XT. Doom Eternal saw the 6900 XT delivering a 7% performance boost from the 6800 XT at 1440p, though that meant it was still 4% slower than the 3090. The margin to the 3090 grew at 4K, as here the 6900 XT was 9% slower, though it was also now 9% faster than the 6800 XT. The last game I'm going to bother looking at is Godfall. Here the 6900 XT was 6% faster than the 6800 XT at 1440p and just 2% faster than the 3090. Then finally, at 4K, the 6900 XT was just 8% faster than the 6800 XT, which meant it trailed the RTX 3090 by a 7% margin. So, no real surprises there. The 6900 XT was up to 12% faster than the 6800 XT, and although it only has 11% more cores, I suspect that our sample was maintaining a higher clock speed in those titles when compared to the 6800 XT, and we did see that in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Still, 12% is pretty uninspiring given that this thing costs over 50% more. Anyways, let's take a look at the 18 game average data at 1080p, 1440p and 4K before moving into the power, temps, overclocking and cost per frame graphs. Oh, and we'll also take a detailed look at ray tracing performance. For those of you targeting low resolution, high refresh rate gaming, the 6900 XT is a better choice than the 3090, though it's typically not that much better. It's also not much better than the 6800 XT, here we're talking about a 5% boost on average. And the 1440p games are ever so slightly better. Here the 6900 XT was an average 8% faster than the 6800 XT and just 2% faster than the 3090. Then at 4K, the 6900 XT was on average just 10% faster than the 6800 XT, but also 6% slower than the RTX 3090. Given the performance you're getting from the RTX 3080 and 6800 XT, it's quite clear that neither the 6900 XT or RTX 3090 make an ounce of sense. Here's a look at ray tracing performance in Control at 1440p using the medium and high quality settings. I've also tested the 3090 with and without DLSS enabled. Basically, we're looking at a 43% reduction in performance for the 6900 XT with medium quality ray tracing enabled, while the 3090 sees just a 23% reduction and is still very playable. Moreover, if we enable DLSS, we see no decrease in performance using the high quality ray tracing. Obviously, this game was developed and optimized to take advantage of Nvidia's hardware, so it should come as little surprise that it works much better with GeForce GPUs, and this is likely something we're going to see with all RTX optimized titles. Another example of this would be Fortnite, which is basically broken with ray tracing enabled on the 6900 XT, at least in terms of performance. That said, the performance hit is pretty disgusting on the RTX 3090 as well, and even DLSS struggles to get us anywhere near native performance. This title can look very visually impressive with ray tracing enabled, but it's not really a game that you'd necessarily play with this feature turned on. I, for example, use competitive quality settings, which sees things like shadows disabled, so I don't really think Fortnite is a good fit for ray tracing. Like Control, Metro Exodus was optimized for Turing, so naturally it plays well with Ampere, and not so well with RDNA 2's ray tracing support. Here we're looking at a 66% reduction in performance when using the ultra quality ray tracing with the 6900 XT, but just a 31% reduction with the 3090. In my opinion, ray tracing in Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a complete bust, and I really struggle to tell the difference when it's enabled. So the 71% hit to the frame rate when using ultra ray traced shadows on the 6900 XT is completely unacceptable, and really so is the 36% hit we see with the 3090. Finally, we have Watch Dogs Legion, which is one of two games that actually use ray traced effects well, the other being Control. The 6900 XT faces a 56% performance reduction with ultra ray tracing enabled, whereas the RTX 3090 saw a 35% reduction, though just 12% with DLSS enabled. Now here's a look at total system power consumption, and quite surprisingly the 6900 XT only uses slightly more power than the 6800 XT. Presumably we are looking at better quality silicon here. And when using Nvidia's PCAP, we again see that the 6900 XT only uses slightly more power than the 6800 XT. Here we're talking about a 1% increase in power usage, so again this will be down to the 6900 XT using higher quality silicon. Then when compared to the RTX 3090, the 6900 XT consumed 14% less power, though it was also slower in Doom. So when looking at performance per watt, we see that the 6900 XT is only slightly better than the RTX 3090, 5% better in this example. Our AMD 6900 XT reference card ran 5 degrees hotter than the 6800 XT model despite using only a few watts more power. However, there is a big difference in fan speed. Whereas the 6800 XT card spun its fans at 1500 RPM, the 6900 XT ran its fans at just 1100 RPM, which makes the 80 degree peak temperature quite impressive. We also saw after 30 minutes of gameplay in Shadow of the Tomb Raider an average clock frequency of 2260 MHz, which is around 50 MHz higher than what we saw in this game with the 6800 XT. Now, like my AMD reference 6800 XT graphics card, this 6900 XT model isn't a great overclocker. I was able to push the cores up to 2.7 GHz in Wattman, and this saw a typical clock frequency in games of around 2550 MHz. And while that's a 13% increase, it only boosted performance in Assassin's Creed Valhalla by 5%, 3% in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and 5% in Watch Dogs Legion. I don't know why the gains are so weak, but this is similar overclocking behavior to what we saw with the reference spec 6800 XT, so I'm keen to test out an AIB 6900 XT as I expect they will overclock much better. Here we're seeing that the 6900 XT comes in at 47% more costly per frame when compared to the 6800 XT, so that's kind of terrible. Basically, it represents the same kind of value as something like the RTX 2080 Super. That said, it does look pretty great in terms of value when compared to the RTX 3090, so yeah, I guess that's just how bad the RTX 3090 is. Things don't improve too much for the 6900 XT at 1440p. Here it's 43% more costly per frame when compared to the 6800 XT, despite being 35% better value per frame when compared to the RTX 3090. Then at 4K, the 6900 XT is 40% more costly per frame when compared to the 6800 XT, though it's almost 30% better value per frame than the RTX 3090. Still, with the RTX 3080 and 6800 XT offering a similar level of value as one another, it's fair to say that the 6900 XT is terrible and the RTX 3090 is horrendous. I'm not really sure what more there is to say at this point. If you've watched this video up to this point, you really know all that you need to. Though if you just watched the introduction, you probably learnt all you needed to know there. Basically, the Radeon RX 6900 XT was never going to make sense, much like what we saw with the RTX 3090, though at least in that example we were getting a lot more VRAM than the part below it. The 6900 XT, on the other hand, it's a 6800 XT with a few extra cores enabled for about a 5 to 10% performance boost. So for the 6900 XT to make sense, it really can't be priced much above maybe $750 US, assuming that you could buy a 6800 XT for $650 US, which you can't really do right now, but we're hoping that that will be something you'll be able to do early next year. At least that's what we're pushing AMD for anyway. Kind of out of our hands, not much we can do about it, but we can only try. Speaking of which, in a world where availability isn't an issue, so bear with me on this one, there is literally zero reason to buy a 6900 XT. You just wouldn't do it. And the same is also true for the RTX 3090 over the RTX 3080, unless for some reason you require that extra VRAM. But short of that, you'd just never buy the $1,500 Ampere GPU. So the 6900 XT is the very definition of a pointless product. It literally exists for no other reason than to allow AMD and their partners to take advantage of fanboys and rich people with more money than sense. That being the case, I can't recommend the 6900 XT just as I couldn't recommend the RTX 3090. Having said all of that, let's for a moment pretend that both products are reasonably priced. Which one should you buy? If you were gaming at 4K or care about ray tracing performance, then I think the RTX 3090 is the better product. It is really too early to call the ray tracing battle, but if you're interested in the games that we have available today, then the GeForce GPU is clearly the way to go. For those of you gaming at 1440p or lower, then the 6900 XT is typically the punchier card, though for the most part it is too close to call. So if they were available at the same price, and it was a reasonable price, then I do feel the RTX 3090 would be the superior product. However, getting back to reality, at $1,500 for the 3090 and $1,000 for the 6900 XT, the Radeon GPU is clearly the better value option, assuming you're not heavily focused on ray tracing, and I think that might be an issue for AMD with these extreme high-end GPUs. Typically, those with super deep pockets who don't care that they're spending 50% more for 10% or less performance, they probably won't care if it costs $1,000 or $1,500. They'll just go with the outright best product because that's clearly what they're after. And as I've said, I think that product is the RTX 3090. It offers 50% more VRAM, more mature ray tracing support that's currently yielding far better results in today's games, DLSS 2.0 support, and for the most part, superior 4K gaming performance. So as I see it, the 6900 XT is kind of stuck in this strange position where it's really bad value compared to the 6800 XT, but kind of good value compared to the RTX 3090, but people looking to invest in this class of GPU obviously don't care about value, they just want the best of the best, and in my opinion, that isn't the 6900 XT. So who then is going to buy the 6900 XT? Again, it's going to be die-hard AMD fans and people who desperately want a 6800 XT but can't find one and aren't willing to wait. Anyway, that is going to do it for my 6900 XT review. In short, don't buy it, as doing so will ensure that the next generation is even more expensive. But hell, I said that about the RTX 3090 and they've been selling like hotcakes, so I guess budget gaming is kind of doomed. And on that bombshell, I'm going to end this video. If you liked this rather depressing look at the 6900 XT, make sure you smash that like button because remember, every dislike is a 6900 XT sold by an eBay scalper. True story. Also, you can join us over on Patreon or Floatplane if you'd like to become a Hardware Unboxed community member. You get access to our monthly live streams. Tim and I will be doing one of those later this month. We have an exclusive Discord chat for Hardware Unboxed community members. Very cool place. Tim and myself are active over there. A lot of very cool people, so if you've got questions or you just want to talk about tech, really great place to do it. Also have Q&As, sorry about that, behind the scenes content. Anyway, if you're interested, links for that stuff is in the video description. If not, that is perfectly fine. And I would like to just thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.